The classroom smelled of old markers and quiet judgment. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning, sunlight crawling through half-open blinds, the low hum of chatter, and the clatter of laptops. But Malik didn't feel ordinary that day. He was 20 years old, back in college after taking a gap year to help his mother pay bills. He sat at the back of the room, quiet, focused, not because he was shy, but because every time he spoke, eyes turned, and not in a good way. Alexa, his teacher, was known for her charm in front of some students and her sharp tone with others. She was young, white, ambitious, and the type who believed she treated everyone the same. But that was the lie people like Malik had learned to recognize too well. That morning, she handed out assignments, pacing the room in her heels. "Remember," she said, "no late submissions. Excuses don't pass in the real world." Malik raised his hand. "Miss Alexa, I emailed you last night. I couldn't upload mine because the school site was down." Her eyes narrowed. "That's funny," she said coldly. "No one else had that problem." A few students chuckled under their breath. Malik's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. "I took screenshots. I can show you." She crossed her arms. "Always a reason, isn't there?" The laughter grew louder. Malik's chest burned, but he swallowed the words rising in his throat. He had learned long ago that defending yourself, when you look like him, sometimes makes you look guilty. But Alexa kept going. "You know, Malik, maybe if you spent less time talking in the back and more time doing your work, you wouldn't be in this situation." He clenched his fists under the desk. "I do my work, every time." The room went silent. There it was, the tone, the one that made her feel challenged, the one that made her eyes flash with that quick mix of fear and anger. "Excuse me?" she said, stepping closer. Malik exhaled slowly. "I said, I do my work. You can check." Alexa stared at him for a moment, then smiled in that tight, fake way people smile when they're really furious. "All right," she said. "Let's check." She turned to her computer, clicking furiously, scrolling. Malik stood there in silence as the students watched. And then, "There's nothing here," she said, her voice rising. "You're lying." "I'm not," Malik said louder than he meant to. "You can check the email. The site was—" "Enough," she snapped. "Sit down, Malik." But he didn't. His body refused. The humiliation, the disbelief, the stares, all of it piled up inside him. His pulse roared in his ears. "Why you always talk to me like I'm a problem?" he said quietly, trembling. "You don't talk to them like that." Alexa froze. Then slowly she picked up her phone. Everyone went still. "What are you doing?" Malik asked. She didn't answer. She stepped back, her voice trembling just enough to sound scared. "Campus security," she said into the phone. "Yes. I have a student being aggressive. He's threatening me." The class gasped. Malik's heart stopped. "What? I didn't threaten you." But no one spoke for him. Not one of them. She backed toward the door. "Stay away from me." He stood there, hands raised, voice breaking. "I didn't touch you. I didn't even move." In less than 5 minutes, the door slammed open. 2 campus police officers entered, David and James. Both white, both with that look of trained suspicion. Alexa pointed. "That's him." David stepped forward. "Hands where we can see them." Malik stammered. "I didn't do anything." "Hands up!" James shouted. He raised them, heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. The room was silent except for the scrape of chairs as students shifted away. Nobody said a word, not one voice to say he didn't do anything. David grabbed Malik's wrist. The metal cuff snapped cold around his skin. "You're coming with us." Malik tried to pull back, not to fight, just to breathe. But the second he moved, James shoved him against the wall. Books crashed to the floor. "Stop resisting!" "I'm not resisting!" Malik yelled, eyes wide with tears. "I didn't—" The door slammed behind them. Alexa stood frozen, one hand over her mouth, her phone still glowing in her palm. She whispered to the class, Let's get back to our lesson." But no one moved. No one looked up. Everyone just stared at the door where Malik had been dragged out. the boy who'd raised his hand just to explain his assignment. That day would spread through the campus like wildfire. Videos would surface, whispers would turn to outrage. But in that moment, as the echo of the door still rang in the silent classroom, one truth settled heavy in the air. All it took was one phone call, one lie, and one teacher's fear. The world outside the police car windows blurred as Malik sat in the back seat, cuffed, humiliated, silent. The sound of the engine was the only thing he could hear. It was like the hum of a nightmare that wouldn't end. Officer David drove, one hand on the wheel, calm and steady. Officer James sat in the passenger seat, staring back at Malik through the wire screen like he was a threat. Malik whispered, "You didn't even ask what happened." James scoffed, "Your teacher said you got aggressive. That's all we need to know." Malik clenched his jaw. "Aggressive? I was talking." David didn't look back. "Then maybe next time, keep your voice down." That sentence hit him like a punch. Keep your voice down. That's what everyone said when they didn't want to hear the truth. They pulled into the small gray brick police building behind the campus. The kind that didn't look like much from the outside, but had 1,000 untold stories trapped inside. The air smelled like coffee and sweat and fear. James shoved open the back door. "Out!" Malik stepped out slowly, his wrists burning from the cuffs. "Why are you treating me like a criminal?" he asked. James laughed. "You think we cuff innocent people for fun?" Malik wanted to shout, to scream, but the words choked inside him because he'd seen how shouting never worked. It only made things worse. They led him down a narrow hallway to a small room. Metal table, 2 chairs, no windows. A buzzing light flickered above him. They uncuffed him, but the marks on his wrists stayed. David sat across from him, clipboard in hand. "All right, Malik, let's start simple. You threatened your teacher today?" "No," Malik said firmly. "I didn't." "She says you did." "She's lying." David raised an eyebrow. "Why would a teacher lie?" Malik laughed bitterly. "You really asking me that?" David leaned back. "Look, we're not here to argue. We just want to know what happened." So Malik told him, every word, every detail, from the moment he raised his hand to the moment she called. David didn't interrupt. He didn't nod. He just wrote something down every few seconds, the kind of writing that never feels like it's helping you. When Malik finished, silence filled the room. Then David said softly, "You got a temper, Malik?" Malik blinked. "What?" "Do you have a temper?" He stared at him. "Only when people lie about me." David sighed. "You see, that sounds like temper." Malik slammed his hands on the table. "That's anger. You'd be angry too if someone accused you of something you didn't do." The door opened. James stepped back in, holding a folder. "Teacher filed a report. Says you stood up, shouted, and got in her face." Malik froze. "She's lying." David looked up. "You got any proof?" "My classmates saw it." "Any of them back up your story?" He hesitated. "I don't know." David smiled faintly. The kind of smile that said you already lost. "Then it's your word against hers." Malik felt the room close in. His heartbeat was loud, fast. The walls felt too small. He ran his fingers over the cuff marks on his wrists. Small, silver bruises that screamed louder than any words could. He whispered, "You just see what you want to see." James crossed his arms. "You want to be careful with that attitude." "What attitude?" Malik shot back. "The one that tells the truth?" James slammed his fist on the table. "That one?" The silence after that was thick. Malik stared at them both. 2 officers who saw a threat, not a person. And then, through the glass window of the hallway outside, a woman appeared. The college dean, gray suit, worried eyes. She whispered something to the officer outside and entered the room. "Gentlemen," she said, voice tense, "we need to stop this." David frowned. "Ma'am, we're conducting an interview." "An interview?" she snapped. "You've got a student handcuffed for what, raising his voice?" James stepped back, annoyed. "The teacher said she felt threatened." The dean turned to Malik. "You all right, son?" He nodded weakly. Then she looked at the officers. "Campus cameras show no physical confrontation. He never touched her, not even close." Silence. Cold, sharp silence. James looked away. David tapped his pen, muttering, "We'll confirm that." But the dean wasn't done. "And before you confirm anything, you should know, half the class emailed me. They said Alexa overreacted. They said she targeted him." Malik's heart thudded. "They did?" She nodded. "They did." David's jaw tightened. He scribbled something and said, "All right, we'll review the footage." The dean looked at Malik again, softer this time. "You're coming with me. You don't belong in this room." As she guided him out, Malik's hands trembled. The hallway felt brighter now, but the weight in his chest was heavier than ever. Outside, the air was sharp with cold. He looked up at the sky, wide and gray, and felt something between relief and rage. The dean said quietly, "Go home for now. I'll handle Alexa." Malik nodded, but his voice cracked when he said, "They didn't even listen to me." She sighed. "They rarely do, but they will." He walked away slowly, each step echoing like thunder in his mind. The cuffs were gone, but the memory of their grip stayed. Back at the station, David watched the hallway monitor in silence. James muttered, "You think the kid's lying?" David didn't answer. He just watched the footage. Malik standing, hands open, eyes full of confusion, Alexa pointing and trembling. And then the truth. No threat, no movement, no aggression. Just fear pretending to be danger. David leaned back, guilt flickering in his eyes. "We might have messed up," he whispered. James frowned. "What are you talking about?" David didn't reply, because deep down he already knew. The sun had already started to fall when Malik walked back across campus. His legs felt heavy, like each step carried the weight of every pair of eyes that had ever looked at him and seen something he wasn't. He should have gone home, but something inside him refused. He wasn't done, not after what they did. The whispers had already spread, down the hallways, across group chats, in hushed voices outside classrooms. "Did you see what happened? Alexa called the cops on him." "Malik didn't even do anything!" He could feel them watching, some with pity, some with fear, some pretending not to care at all. At the far end of the hall, Alexa's office door was slightly open. He could hear her talking, fast, nervous, trying to defend herself to someone on the phone. "I did what I had to do," she said, her voice sharp. "He was aggressive. I felt unsafe. You weren't there. You didn't see how he looked at me." Malik froze. How he looked at me. That sentence hit him like a slap. He wanted to walk in, to scream that he had looked at her with nothing but hurt, not hate, not anger. But what would it matter? People like her didn't see the difference. He turned to leave, but then, "Alexa?" It was the dean's voice. Malik stepped back into the shadows as the dean walked in, her heels echoing on the tile. Alexa turned, forcing a polite smile. "Oh, hi. I was just—" "We need to talk," the dean interrupted. Alexa's smile faltered. "About the incident?" "Yes, about the false report." Alexa's eyes widened. "False? I didn't lie." The dean placed a folder on the desk. "Cameras don't lie, Miss Alexa, and neither do 16 students who all said the same thing. Malik never touched you, never threatened you. He only raised his voice when you accused him of lying." Alexa's face went pale. "That's not what it looked like to me." The dean crossed her arms. "Then maybe what it looked like to you says more about your prejudice than his behavior." Silence. A long, heavy silence. Alexa's lip trembled. "I'm not racist. I've always treated all my students the same." "No," the dean cut her off. "You thought you did. That's the problem." Alexa sank into her chair, speechless. Outside the door, Malik's fists tightened. He didn't want her to cry. He didn't want her sympathy. He wanted accountability. The next morning, campus felt different. Posters on the walls, hashtags online. Justice for Malik. Heck, he did nothing wrong. Students gathered in the courtyard, voices rising like a wave. Some held signs that read, "Stop calling the cops on us." Others shouted, "We saw it! He didn't do anything!" Malik stood at the edge, watching. He hadn't started this, but it had started something in him. His friend Tara ran up, out of breath. "Malik, you gotta see this!" She pulled out her phone, a video from the classroom. Someone had filmed everything. It showed Malik standing calmly, explaining himself. It showed Alexa backing away, pretending to be scared. It showed the moment she called the police, her voice trembling not with fear but power. The video had gone viral overnight. Malik stared at the screen, a mix of anger and disbelief in his chest. "This is what they saw," he said quietly. "And they still cuffed me." Tara nodded. "Yeah, but now everyone else can see too." He looked around at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, black, white, brown, all chanting his name. For the first time since that morning, he didn't feel small. He felt seen. Meanwhile, in the staff room, Alexa sat alone. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Emails, social media notifications, news headlines. "Teacher calls police on black student. Video proves him innocent." Her hands shook. Her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Her inbox flooded with hate. Her friends stopped replying. She whispered to herself, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But meaning didn't matter anymore. The world had already made up its mind, and this time, it wasn't hers to control. David, the officer who arrested Malik, watched the same video from his desk at the precinct. He watched himself walking into that classroom. He watched himself cuff a boy who hadn't even raised his hands in anger. He paused the video halfway, staring at Malik's face, calm, confused, terrified. He whispered, "We really messed up." James looked over. "What are you doing?" David sighed. "I'm filing a statement. I need to own up." James frowned. "You're going to throw us under the bus?" "No," David said quietly. "I'm trying to stop the bus from running over another kid like him." He stood up and walked out of the room. That afternoon, Malik was called to a meeting with the dean again. When he entered, Alexa was there too, pale, nervous, eyes red from crying. The dean gestured for them both to sit. "Malik," she said, "we've reviewed everything. Alexa has agreed to apologize to you personally." Alexa turned to him, voice trembling. "Malik, I'm sorry, I panicked. I thought you were angry, and I felt threatened. I didn't mean to cause this." Malik stared at her. He wanted to believe her, but the words wouldn't come out. After a long pause, he said, "You didn't think. You assumed. You saw me raise my voice, and instead of listening, you saw danger." She wiped her eyes. "You're right." He leaned forward. "And because of that, I spent a night in fear, in handcuffs. My mother cried thinking I'd be in jail. You don't just get to say sorry and walk away." Alexa swallowed hard. "I know. I'm taking a leave. They're investigating me." Malik nodded slowly. "Then maybe you'll have time to think about what your fear costs people like me." The dean said softly, "Malik, the school will release a statement clearing your name. You did nothing wrong." He stood up. "I know." He turned to leave, but before walking out, he said one last thing. Quiet, steady, powerful. "You called the police on me because you could, and that's the whole problem." That night, the video hit 1 million views. Across the internet, people argued, some defending Alexa, some demanding justice. But Malik didn't scroll through the comments. He sat on his bed, hands clasped, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't sure what justice even meant anymore. All he knew was that something had broken, not just in him, but in the system around him. And breaking was sometimes the only way things changed. By the next morning, Malik's name was everywhere. News channels, hashtags, TV panels. Every feed, every phone, every headline told the same story. A young black college student falsely accused by his teacher, arrested for nothing. The truth had left the classroom, left the campus, and exploded into the world. Malik woke up to hundreds of missed calls. His phone buzzed endlessly. Reporters, activists, students, people he had never met. His mother, eyes tired but proud, whispered, "They're finally listening." But Malik didn't feel like celebrating. Every notification, every headline, every video clip felt like a scar being replayed in slow motion. Everyone was watching his pain, but few understood it. He sat at the edge of his bed, the cuffs still bruised into his memory. It didn't matter how many times people said justice will come. It should have never happened at all. Meanwhile, the college was in chaos. Students were marching across campus chanting, "No justice, no peace." Professors demanded accountability. Alexa's classes were suspended. The dean held emergency meetings trying to calm the storm. And in one of those meetings, Alexa sat at the long table, surrounded by faculty members who refused to look at her. Her hands trembled. "I didn't mean for this to become national news," she said quietly. "I panicked." One of the professors snapped. "You didn't panic. You profiled. You abused your power." Alexa looked down. "I was scared." Another voice shot back. "You weren't scared. You were in control. That's the difference." The room fell silent. The dean finally said, "Alexa, you're on indefinite suspension. There will be a public statement later today." Alexa nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. She wanted to apologize again, to explain herself, but she knew no one wanted to hear her anymore. For once, her voice didn't matter. Back at the police station, David sat staring at a blank report on his computer. His statement was due. A report explaining what happened that day. He replayed the body cam footage again and again. Malik's calm voice, his open hands, the sound of James shouting, "Stop resisting!" when Malik hadn't moved at all. David felt sick. He closed the video, leaned back, and whispered to himself, "I let it happen." James walked in behind him. "You finished that report yet?" David didn't turn around. "Not yet." James dropped into the chair across from him. "Man, you're overthinking this. We did what we were called to do." David turned slowly. "You still believe that?" James shrugged. "The teacher said she was threatened. We acted on her word." David's voice hardened. "Her word put an innocent kid in cuffs. We're supposed to verify, not obey." James scoffed. "It's not our job to figure out who's lying. We just respond." David stood up. "That's the problem, James. We respond. We never ask." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. That evening, Malik sat in a small cafe with Tara, scrolling through the flood of messages online. People were sending donations, messages of support, apologies, and anger. Tara smiled faintly. "You've started something big." Malik didn't look up. "I didn't want to start something, I just wanted to finish my class." She sighed. "Yeah, but sometimes the truth doesn't wait for when you're ready." He looked at her, exhausted. "They called me a threat because I spoke up. Now they're calling me brave for surviving it. What's the difference?" Tara said quietly, "The difference is, now they're listening." Just then, his phone buzzed. It was an email from the college. He opened it, heart racing. "Dear Malik, the administration has reviewed your case. You have been fully cleared of all accusations. We sincerely apologize for the distress caused. You are welcome to return to class at any time." He exhaled slowly, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a wound closing without healing. "Welcome to class," he whispered, "after you called the cops on me." Later that night, on a national talk show, the host played the viral video. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "what we're seeing here isn't new. It's the same story, different names, fear disguised as authority, power disguised as protection." Clips of Alexa's classroom played beside headlines of other stories. Black men and women falsely accused, arrested, or worse. "This time, he survived," the host said. "But how many others didn't?" In her apartment, Alexa watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. Her name was on every headline. Her face was on every thumbnail. She whispered to herself, "I ruined his life." But deep down, she knew. She hadn't just ruined his life. She'd exposed hers. Her privilege, her assumptions, her blindness. And for the first time, she saw what everyone else had been seeing all along. Herself. Meanwhile, David requested a meeting with the department chief. He stood tall but nervous as he handed in his badge. The chief looked confused. "You're resigning?" David nodded. "Yes, sir. I can't do this job if I'm part of the problem." The chief leaned back. "You think walking away fixes it?" David's eyes darkened. "No, but pretending it's not broken doesn't either." He walked out quietly, leaving his badge on the desk. A small piece of metal that had once meant honor, but now only reminded him of shame. Back on campus, the protest grew. Students lit candles for every name that had ever been called aggressive, dangerous, or threatening just for speaking. Malik stood in front of them. Not on a stage, not behind a microphone, just standing there, watching the flickering lights. A girl in the crowd shouted, "Say his name!" The crowd responded, "Malik!" He shook his head gently. "No," he said into the air. "Don't say my name. Say all the names they never listened to." The crowd went quiet, then lifted their candles higher. That night, the campus didn't feel divided anymore. It felt alive. It felt like truth finally had a sound, and it was louder than fear. The next morning, Malik received a message. It was from an unknown number. "I know sorry isn't enough, but I needed to say it anyway. David." Malik stared at it for a long time. Then he replied with just 2 words. "Do better." A month had passed. The world had moved on. At least that's what it looked like. The hashtags slowed down. The news cycle spun away to something new. But for Malik, the story didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Because when you've been humiliated, handcuffed, and doubted for simply existing, you don't just move on. You rise up. He sat alone in the library, the same seat he used to sit in before everything changed. His books were open, but his eyes stared past the pages, at the memory of that day. Alexa's voice, the cold steel cuffs, the silence of everyone who saw it and said nothing. He'd replayed it in his head 1,000 times, wondering what he could have done differently. But every time, the truth hit him harder. It wasn't his job to fix a system that broke itself. Now he wanted something else. Change. Outside, the campus was buzzing again, not with gossip, but with purpose. Students had started an organization. Voice. Voices of inclusion, change, and equality. And they wanted Malik to lead it. At first, he refused. "I'm not an activist," he told Tara. "I'm just a student." She smiled softly. "You were a student the day they arrested you, too." And look how many people listened. He hesitated, staring out the window. Maybe she was right. Maybe his story wasn't just his anymore. The next week, Malik stood on a small stage in the courtyard, a microphone trembling in his hand. Hundreds of students filled the space, faces of every color, eyes full of anger, hope, and exhaustion. He took a breath. "I didn't want to be here today," he began. "I didn't want to be the kid in the viral video. I didn't want to be the boy who got arrested for raising his hand. But here I am. Because silence is worse." He paused. The crowd was dead silent. "I used to think keeping my head down would keep me safe, but it didn't. Because when people have power and no accountability, silence just gives them permission." He looked around, as at his classmates, at the dean standing in the back, at the media cameras recording every word. "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to change something." So no one else gets dragged out of a classroom for being heard. The crowd erupted, cheers, chants, applause echoing across campus. Malik's voice cracked as he said the last words. "Justice isn't when people apologize. It's when they learn." That same day, in a small disciplinary hearing room, Alexa sat across from a university board. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was calm. "I understand what I did," she said quietly. "And I'll spend the rest of my life unlearning why I did it." The board nodded. She was officially terminated, not because of public pressure, but because the evidence spoke louder than her excuses. As she walked out, she saw a student poster on the wall, Malik's face beside the words, "Listen before you fear." She stopped, staring at it for a long time. For the first time in weeks, she didn't cry out of guilt. She cried out of understanding. Back at the police department, Officer David had started something new. He returned, not as a cop, but as a speaker. He visited police academies, schools, and community meetings. His talk was called "The Cost of One Lie." He showed the footage of Malik's arrest. He paused it on the frame where Malik's eyes met his own. Calm, terrified, undeserving. Then David told them, "That's the moment I realized we don't protect people if we don't respect them first." Some officers rolled their eyes, others nodded. But a small few, really listened. And that was enough to start something. Weeks later, Malik was walking to class when someone called out behind him. "Malik!" He turned. It was David. No uniform this time, just jeans, a jacket, and a quiet humility. "I heard about your group," David said. "Voice, right?" Malik nodded carefully. David smiled faintly. "You're doing good work. Maybe I can help. Teach young officers to actually listen." Malik studied him for a moment. "You can start by listening here." David nodded. "I'm ready to." And for the first time, Malik believed him. That night, Malik sat in his room, scrolling through old photos on his phone. There was one of him before everything happened, sitting at that same desk, smiling, carefree. He barely recognized that version of himself. He whispered, "You didn't deserve what happened, but you made it mean something." He closed the phone and looked out the window. The campus lights glowed softly, and somewhere in the distance, students were still chanting. Not his name this time. Just one word. Change. In a televised interview weeks later, Malik sat across from a journalist who asked, "Do you forgive them? The teacher, the officers, the school?" Malik thought for a long time before answering. "I don't forgive what they did, but I forgive myself for surviving it. Because I used to think being angry made me weak. Now I know it made me awake." The audience applauded quietly. Malik looked into the camera, straight, steady, unbroken, and said, "If my story made you uncomfortable, good. Change starts with discomfort." Months later, Alexa walked into a small community center where Voice was holding an open forum. She didn't speak. She just listened. Malik noticed her but didn't say a word. When the event ended, she approached him slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly. "I just wanted to listen, like I should have done from the start." Malik nodded. "Then you're already doing better than before." They stood there for a moment. No anger, no shouting, just quiet understanding. And in that silence, the story that began with fear ended with something else, growth. That night, Malik stood outside under the stars, breathing in the cold air. The campus around him was alive again, laughing, learning, unafraid. He closed his eyes and whispered, "They called the police on me because they could. Now we speak up because we must." The wind carried his words away, not as anger anymore, but as truth. And that truth, once feared, silenced, and handcuffed, was finally free.